Welcome to Demand Gen Confidential, the marketing podcast where we'll be talking with some of the most progressive marketers out there, diving deep into marketing tactics to help you become a better marketer. Let's jump into today's episode.
The first conversation I think we ever had was back when you did some consulting for a company I was at, and it was this Trend Kite days, right? That you had mentioned to me when you had gone from a small team to a much larger team through an acquisition. And so I kind of wanted to just start there because I think that probably introduces a bunch of the different topics that we'll talk about. But like, what is that like? You were just basically like, I was managing this small team. We got acquired and I had all these people and did all this stuff and just rolled from there.
It really was I love to start there, and I appreciate you asking that because it was a truly just a growth story in all sense of the word, people, process, and technology, right? And being a part of something like that was pretty amazing. Putting numbers behind it, scaling it from a 10 to 30 million ARR organization inside of a couple of years was pretty spectacular. And it wasn't just, it was the formation of the people that were around that, from, product to sales to marketing to finance to leadership. It was just the melding together of just the right people, right time, which is how usually some of these things go. But yeah, started a small team. We were, very smart in our growth and diligent with it. And it was, the ROI afforded us the opportunity to grow as we went on. But yeah, it was getting to that 30 million mark, and then to get a fun, email, hey, come sign this paperwork because we're going into due diligence because Cision's acquiring us. We went at acquisition. But yeah, I at the height of it for me, a team of almost 70 when it was all said and done. But it was a unique situation in that Cision actually employed the leadership of Trend Kite into their key roles, because that was one of the things they were investing in, was the Trend Kite engine. And they wanted to replicate that, and marketing, specifically growth marketing, which is what I led, was what they wanted. So.
Yeah. And so how many people was your Trend Kite team? And then you said you made it up to 70.
Yeah. Trend Kite at time of acquisition, 14, 16 people, and that included development reps. So That was one of the things I had the opportunity to lead there. And then it was just, inheriting the demand gen folks in every country, because Cision is a global organization, $1 billion organization, publicly traded. And so we had marketing teams and, all over the world. And so it was a very quick get to know you, how do things run in the Netherlands versus Canada versus Mexico versus South America versus US, and let's go. So
that's crazy. Tripling, like over tripling, really. I guess in that you probably developed, and maybe you had this before that time, but you probably developed some opinions or thoughts about building teams, hiring people, and what you look for, or what, types of things make up good teams.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, revenue wins respect, man, across the board. So, one thing, if I'm looking at the last, maybe 10 years of just being a B2B SaaS marketer, just in general, it has been, the changes, the landscape has just shifted tenfold across the board, right? So, a lot of times, I was actually just speaking with a former colleague of mine, just a catch up actually this morning. They were talking about their outbound engine. There's just employing an ungodly number of SDRs running outbound. And I was like, wow, I haven't heard that formula in like 5 years. And that's, again, not that long ago, but it is long ago in tech terms. But, one of the things just from a hiring standpoint is that I've always taken on is sometimes the math is wrong. Right. And, when it says to hire, 20 new SDRs, sometimes maybe let's hire 10 and let's fill their cups and get them going. And so that was a little bit of the modeling that I undertook when it came to building a team, specifically at Trend Kite, was making sure that, we were, the human aspect, the people aspect, we had their cup runneth over before we went out and hired somebody new. Right. And I think that helped us to be a little bit more formidable, helped us understand our craft a little bit more. create a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit across the team. And then, ultimately led to results. And so made my job easier when I actually did go ask for headcount. Like, oh man, you guys aren't over hiring. You guys are doing the job without a ton of headcount. That's great. Yeah. Go hire that highly talented person to fulfill a role.
That's interesting. Like sparks a story 5 years ago that was probably against the grain because headcount was the name of the game. But growing up, high school, swam in college, I was a swimmer. And our coach, the coach that I had on our club team, year-round club team, he was Olympic level. He ran the high school team for a while, much earlier than when I did it. And he ran the women's varsity team with 12 swimmers, which was like a third of what anybody else ran their varsity team with. And they won every meet. And his comment was like, I'm not going to dilute the program with just people. I want the best. And then it ultimately became a destination place. And so that logic, you can take that logic of, just having a certain caliber or a certain type of person that then makes the team work.
Yeah. And and there's no shame in that, and, again, you can fall into those traps of like, okay, we need to hire, again, I'm picking on my SDR friends here. We can, hire 20 of those. And yes, we need to hire a full marketing team, as you and I are very fluent in and have seen in the past there where maybe it's like, all right, let's take this a step at a time. It's not to say that people aren't important. Those roles aren't important. It's just grow into them. Take the time to grow into them.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, why don't I do a little introduction since we've already kicked off and gotten started? So for everybody that's listening in, I'm here with David. He's a seasoned marketing executive. I wanted to talk to him because he knows the balance between tactical and campaign and marketing execution. So hopefully he can leave us with some great tips. He's built SaaS businesses, like you mentioned with the acquisition of Trendkite. He's been through acquisitions, multiple exits, and now advises startups and is a fractional CMO. David, is there anything else you would like the audience to know about you?
Oh, I mean, thanks for that introduction. I feel humbled a little bit there, just kind of hearing that. But yeah, no, I've built a career in marketing. It has been exciting, but it is very vanilla. Honestly, I went to school and got a degree in marketing, which is not very common. You'd be surprised. A lot of folks, that end up in marketing didn't start there. But I just enjoyed the semester-long projects. I enjoyed, the process of learning how things go to market and what that entails. And so I've built a career on that, and I've built a career on enjoying holding down different, just about almost every marketing function you can think of, from product to demand gen to field to digital to ops to development reps. Across the board, I've been fortunate enough to do that. But no, I've just built a career on being a growth marketer across the board. And, in the startup tech space is really where I've really kind of found my niche and, good startup scale up opportunities to drive ARR. So.
Nice. And you mentioned sitting in growth marketing. That's what we're going to talk about, demand gen confidential. But we also talked a little bit about being on small teams, which I think that's going to be a trend. But in order to be in demand gen growth marketing on a small team, you have to be able to talk the numbers. And you had mentioned kind of when we were prepping this, that you used to be able to walk down the hall and the CEO would ask you, how's marketing doing? And you could do it in one sentence with a certain set of metrics to give them a pulse on the business. And that is an extremely difficult thing for us marketers to do. I think you called it fluent speak. How do you do that? How do you get to that point?
Wow. How long is your podcast? No, it really was a defining moment. And everyone that was there in that experience will tell you, it was just like, to get to that point, it's not easy. And it takes a village, right? If I had done it all myself, I would have sunk that well and retired, right? A while back. But no, the example you just gave was something that I took a lot of pride in, which was being able to very, very accurately convey to leadership, to the board, to whoever needed to the organization, what marketing was contributing to the business. Right. And so it started, with a lot of diligent work on our ICP, understanding who we're selling to, why we're losing, why we're winning, all the things in between, tapping into what works, eliminating what doesn't work. And I'm oversimplifying it right now for the purposes of the soundbite here, right? Finding those one or two great plays that work. And then, become the fluent speak, as you mentioned before, right? Is getting to a point in alignment across the board, across an organization. We're talking product, finance, sales, marketing, account management, success is, just that speak on like, okay, how are we measuring everyone across the buyer's journey, what we're calling that, and then beyond, getting into customer marketing and so forth. And that ultimately led us to, okay, we had a single touch attribution model. We could track specifically if we're going to run a specific style of campaign through a specific channel. We can tell you what that's producing to the dollar amount. So yeah, it was pretty sophisticated, pretty awesome. And yeah, it was successful.
So how do you balance? So you had a single touch attribution model. And one of the things that we struggle in marketing, and I think every marketer struggles with this, is the one touch that you're going to give credit to, and then all the other activities that are going on. And that's not to say, like, sometimes we have too many activities we're doing and we should pare it down. But like, what's that balance of, we're sending emails. Should we keep doing that? How are we tracking that into, demo requests off of Google search? And pairing that balance to be able to still do certain things, also have fluent speak.
It sounds overly simplified, man, but as you go through the data, and I'll touch on this here, but as you go through all the data and all the points of interaction and traffic and downloads and all the stuff that you can measure there, ultimately it comes down to communication. It comes down to communication cross team. And this is where, the diligence around ICP work is so crucial, especially now. I'm just a firm believer. It's become so much more now, given the fact that individuals consume content, consume information in so many different ways. The sales process has become very, very complex as a result of that. Throw market conditions into that. So pile all those things on is an understanding of like what does a win look like and what does a loss look like. And man, I've sat in these very painful win-loss discovery and discussion meetings. That's one of the things that just comes to mind. And one of the ways we got better in this example is understanding that, discussing it, debating it. And those debates could get pretty heated, especially across marketing and sales, as I know you and know your audience will probably can relate to. But ultimately reaching some resolution there, and then just everybody taking their piece of that, going and doing their homework and implementing it. For marketing, it was taking that ICP, it was the message, it was the targeting, it was the plays we ran, and it was the follow through on if it's working or not, right? And so that's probably, if I were to hinge on one area right there, it's the ICP work is not one and done. It's not hey, we figured out our ICP, everybody go. You got to talk about it daily. You got to talk about your audience daily. Are they coming to you? They're coming to you. Why? If they're leaving, why? And then the work you're doing behind it, man, if it's working, keep doing it. If it's not, you got to cut it off. And so you mentioned some examples there. The data is going to tell you that.
Okay. And you talk about ICP work, like, what are you specifically saying? What did you do for ICP work? And like, why do you think that's even more important now?
Well, I think everyone's has an idea of what their customer is. And you have, in any organization, you'll have experts on, this is who we're going to sell into and why. And it's usually right.
Yeah.
In the case that we've been talking about, we're talking about PR professionals, right? And you're talking about, folks in PR that are, everyone's built different. Some are data driven, which is what we were selling. Some aren't. Actually, most weren't. That's nothing against my PR friends. It's just, they were just like, they were more about getting the news out, than really uncovering and unpacking of like how it's performing. And that's what we were selling. So we had to, figure out kind of what that really sort of meant to them. And it's interesting what the data came back to us with. And you and I had this conversation a little bit on what it ended up realizing to us. And if you don't mind me jumping over to this, but one of the things we unpacked with data was we sold a heck of a lot of business into universities, right? And so I want to talk about universities here for a second, is that universities were buying for us at a very high click, but we didn't study that process. And one of the things we uncovered and realized was that universities bought in the springtime. They bought in the April, May timeframe. They closed their books in May. You're not gonna get $1 out of them until the following year. And that's just a fact. You know, they're not going to, because they assign the budget and they pay out the money, and then they're going to revisit it in the next spring. So we had to be very diligent about when they came back to term in the fall, is starting to plant those seeds with our campaign specific to universities to get, generate that interest, get them to come in, get them to take the demos, so that by the time that April, May came around, it's raining university deals coming down, right? So extreme alignment with how they think, how they buy, and then, equipping the organization with like, okay, get ready for, those conversations, get ready for those campaigns. Let's go get them.
That's an interesting example because like it's a very specific moment in time and you have to plan all of your activities to hit that particular moment. And I've been on a lot of marketing teams, and that's extremely difficult because you're having to start thinking like 2 quarters ahead or, months ahead. Like, how do you incorporate that kind of planning, and that you need all of your demo requests from universities to happen by, I don't know, I think you said May, like whatever month it was.
Well, you gotta put to bed the whole leads at any cost model,
Yeah.
and mentality for a second. Now, you're not turning the lights off. Don't get me wrong there. You're not turning the lights off for, planning or recalibration, whatever. You got to run, you've got the masses to talk to, but you can build content and, run plays and, put out videos and webinars and content and things just to keep the masses coming in. You're using that data to create sort of some simplified times of the year to go after someone, as you mentioned before, right? The idea is, a focus on that growth marketing and what you can build that's repeatable in that, predictable and repeatable. And so that repeatable aspect of it in this university example, we knew what 80% of the second year around, we knew 80% of what we were going to do. The third year around, it was just like, let's update a few things, flip the switch.
Yeah.
I mean, and let it run. Right. And it brings into, again, how long's your podcast? Because it brings into conversations of like, a lot of times marketing teams don't get that opportunity to get into year 3 or what have you.
Yeah.
So that brings up a bit of patience that it takes. But yeah, I remember that was a big piece of it to where we were to have that success, is we were given, first year was good. Second year was better. Third year was like, people just expected it, and it happened and it grew. But, getting to that layer of just repeatability is what you're ultimately trying to get to. So
that's interesting because so year 3, like average tenure of a CMO is 18 months right now. Nobody's getting to year 3. Like, this is probably, we have a script and we've completely derailed the whole thing, but the 18 months, like, how do you get to year 3? And this is probably a good concluding part for just getting into Fluent speak and seeing like what metrics you should be doing in order to get yourself to year 3 so you can have that repeatable motion. Like, do you have any advice there? Or thoughts? Or maybe not advice, just opinions or thoughts.
I have advice, I have opinions on it. I think, there's the focus on the ICP, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And I don't mind sounding like a broken record talking about that till I'm blue in the face, because that's just absolutely critical. Is just, the buyer, just as much as like a salesperson is thinking about that, the marketer, or especially the growth marketer, should really be thinking about that, right? And this goes along with everything else, all the data points that you have in between, all of your pipeline efficiency and pipeline volume. I was taking a mental note because I was thinking about this, because the Fluent speak, just sort of term had me thinking. It's like, I have a, just my mental playbook of when I go to an organization about when you think about speak. And it's a big one that is often missed is CAC, or a CAC playbook.
Okay.
Is something that when I think about, what a marketer should have, this is cost per acquisition. This is being aligned with finance on like, how long does it take us to make that money back? We're going to do all these things in marketing to generate new business, right? Because the university program I just mentioned before, that costs money.
Yeah.
Right. Technology, man hours. If we ran any programmatic spend in it, or if we did an event, or if we did anything like that, that costs money. So ultimately the deals that we close within that campaign, are they paying for, is it paying for itself, or how long does it take to make that money back? Right. And I can tell you right now, because I knew it, right? We're at 13 months, about 13 months.
Yeah.
And that's where we got that down from double that but that's what we were after. So, cost per acquisition,
So question,
pipeline
sorry to
efficiency.
interrupt you in that.
Sure.
Like when you say CAC playbook, what do you mean by CAC playbook?
The marketing view
Okay.
of what cost per acquisition is.
Okay.
Your own view, right? A CFO is going to have the CAC, the company CAC model with everything that spans, right? That's their job. What I enjoy doing is taking the marketing piece of that and having my own piece of it that I'm looking at on a daily basis, right? Yeah, my team loved and hated me for it, but yes, I had the big spreadsheet with all our stuff in it, right?
Yeah.
How much all of our people, process, and technology, how much it all cost, and what we were contributing, was it working or not, right? What was I? I was talking about just some relative terms to think about in there. I don't know if we can go down that route.
And then I think the next one was going to be pipeline. Sorry, I interrupted because I wanted to figure out what that CAC playbook was, but pipeline.
Yeah. CAC's a hard one to get to, but pipeline efficiency is just how things are moving through your funnel, right? And that's some 101 stuff. SQLs to win rates, maybe a bit unpopular, but I think jumping to more of that qualified, lead or opportunity now. I think a lot of us in marketing have changed our tune in the last 5 to 10 years and realized that it's like, yeah, we don't want to die on the MQL hill anymore.
Yeah.
Because, you mentioned the 18 months. Don't want to die on that hill.
Yeah.
And then what that does is it gets you into a point of marketing sourced revenue, which is what I've probably been getting at, is being able to, accurately communicate what's being contributed, because the marketing sourced revenue gets into things like ARR growth attribution, right? We are growing because marketing is contributing 51% of new business month over month, right? When you're able to put that together, and again, takes a village. And I know anybody that was on my team back then, that was fun to walk around and be able to say that and prove it, right? Getting to the point. You can get into some other aspects of it too. One of the things I think teams, it's funny, still, we spend so much effort on new business, but the customer marketing or the retention marketing aspect of it, or life cycle, whatever you want to call it. But then you get into expansion influence and retention impact, right? And I always remember back to that trend kite example that you brought up before. It's like, we just decided, let's do some customer marketing, see what happens. And I'll never forget, we put a little team on it. We put an SDR on it and said, hey, we just need you to follow up with customer inbounds. I don't know. I'll never forget. She found, about $250K in upsell, cross sell, renewal opportunities inside of a quarter. Just found money.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a little bit of effort on the customer side. So expansion, influence, and retention impact. I would kind of leave it at that. So.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think that's becoming more and more a big deal for companies because it's way more efficient way to generate revenue. Like new logo is hard in any business, Yeah, that's a good example to add in there.
That could be a podcast episode for you as well, as talking about that side of the house, right? Because we put so much money, so much energy and humans on new business.
Yeah.
It's really easy. And I'm telling you, customer marketing can feed the whole machine if you're smart with it, because they can help with obviously proficiency, renewal, upsell, cross sell, all that stuff. But man, you start really making them happy, then it's like, all right, speak on a webinar with us or write some content with us, do some video work with us. And then you just throw it on the other side of the fence to new business. And there you go.
Yeah. That's one of the hot buttons I'm on lately, is just that putting customers at the center of all of your marketing. Because you can pull, messaging work from that, and you can use it for new business and expansion. And who doesn't like hearing success stories from customers? I mean, everybody likes that. And it comes by so many different names now, like lifecycle marketing, jumped out of nowhere on me. I don't know why, but it was like, oh, it's just customer marketing basically, or revenue marketing, just a combo of new logo and expansion. All these marketers are crazy when they have these.
We're terrible with that. The fads with the acronyms and things. I try to keep an even kill. I say growth to encompass everything. I just, I've gotten away from demand gen because I felt demand gen has a different meaning to different folks nowadays, right? But at the end of the day, hey man, we're catch-all professionals, man. It's like, you put us in, coach, wherever we're needed, and we play the position the best we can, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Even growth, like I always think of technical marketers from, early web marketing or digital marketing. It's crazy.
yeah,
Like it comes back around. All of it comes back around.
yeah,
But you probably have a way better lens on that now, especially since you're doing fractional work and you get to see a lot of different teams. And kind of one of the things that I want to get into a bit, because we're in this leaner team. We talked about it earlier, lean teams. We talked about CAC and payback periods, which all those metrics are far more important now in the profitability era.
right.
Like now that you see a lot of different teams, what trends are you seeing that's kind of pre-pandemic growth, post-pandemic growth? That's growth at all costs versus profitable growth now that we should think about.
Well, the profitable growth is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It's how we attain it is what I think right now is really just sort of becoming the anchor point for success there. And for me, I literally look at the transformation, what's happened here in the last couple of years. I remember where I was 3 years ago when I was introduced to ChatGPT. So now we're getting into the world of AI and go to market.
3 years early on.
It was early. It was early. And I was sitting at a dinner table. I was in London. I was at a company omnipresent. I was with our CEO, and he had just heard of it that day. And he was just like, have you seen this thing? And we he pulled out his phone and we started like messing around, and didn't have the app yet, I don't think, but we were on the web, and just we honestly sat in silence like a couple of like teenagers at a dinner table for the rest of the meal, could just like plug in random stuff in just to see what would happen. And so anyway, I think we've just kind of gone through this, very quickly. You've gone to this like, oh, wow, have you seen this thing? Have you looked at this thing? Oh, wow, this thing is going to explode. What have you to, I would say probably last year, maybe just the year before, a little bit of bogarting, a little bit of more fear, a little bit like just, hey, organizations are like, let's not use AI in our workplace, or we're going to put restrictions around it, or we're going to build our own thing. So to me, it reminds me a lot of when CRM was introduced to the marketplace. And I'll probably show my age here, but yeah, this is 20 years ago, introduced in the marketplace, where it was like, who would share all their data out on a cloud, or who would put all their stuff somewhere that's accessible like that. So let's build our own, let's bogart it and build our own. Right. And so there's a few years of that and sifting through these homegrown CRMs, and then ultimately, we know what happened there. So I think the world is kind of going through a little bit of that. And what I've really enjoyed here recently is a little bit more show and tell. And that's what I'm a fan of right now when I think about it. I found myself in my fractional role. You had a question? Do you want to chime in?
No, the only thing I was going to say on the CRM stuff, I worked for an internet startup, and one of the guys had on his computer, the cloud is just somebody else's computer. It was like the sticker of like a tech guy's opinion of that period. So at any rate, just to comment.
It's funny how it's just very similar. That's what I'm talking about. There was
Yeah.
a fear, right? There was a fear of your data,
Yep.
and rightfully so, right? You got to figure things out. I get that. But there was inherent fear with it. And you got a lot of people right now are still fearful. They feel fearful of AI. I was speaking at a conference recently and I was hosting a roundtable, and I couldn't get over that. It's like, there were a couple of people at the table that were just like, I'm not touching AI. I don't want to lose my job, or I don't want to figure it out. And I was sort of shocked by that. And I felt like I needed to come here, let me show you something. Just test the waters here. All the way to obviously like very advanced users and so forth. So I think we're all kind of in it together. But no, I was in a fractional role here recently where the embracement of it and really the sharing and showing of my work became very important to me, and important to be successful.
Mhm.
As fractional roles go, a 2-month stint turned to 3, turned to 4, turned to 6, turned to, multiple. And so I took on more and more, and leading and working with a marketing team as well as an SDR team, as an army of one, as a lot of marketers out there can relate to, a lot of work to do out there. So I just started tinkering. I'll be blunt. I started tinkering with GPTs in ChatGPT, tinkering with apps and other platforms, testing some things out, not just content, but data. Started plugging in data points in. I built a SEO GPT for what I was doing, because I just wanted to see like, okay, maybe I could save some money with the organization and also get a better understanding of what our content strategy is doing, how it's performing. So I started plugging in numbers and content and things into that. And I started to be very pleasantly surprised with the results. Running an SDR team, you got to be on top of performance by rep, by team, by pipeline coverage for the sales team and all of these things. And I could spend 5 hours a day, in Salesforce tinkering with this stuff. Built myself a little app, gave that app a name, and every morning I would just punch into the SDR manager app that I built, and she would spit out my morning report. She'd spit out all of our trends in our pipeline, and she would do it for the team. She would do it for the executive team. She would help me prepare for the board meeting. And it was just a very simple, not simple, but input of data, input of what was important to the team, the data, the reports and things I would look at. And then I would just have to couple it with a couple of Salesforce screenshots and what have you in there just to like give it an update. And then boom, I was off to the races. I had my reporting done, and then I could focus on other things like coaching.
Yeah.
And development and, developing the rapport with the team for optimal performance. So list can go on and on here, but ultimately what I've ended up with is basically my own AI go-to-market team that crosses all facets of marketing right now. And I continue to use that right now in my business.
Yeah. I mean, the AI thing is like, I don't know what I did. And I've said this on other episodes of this, but I've gotten my LinkedIn feed such that I have a lot of people talking about like what it's going to do, like like all of that stuff. You talk about the fear and like the way you talk about it, the SDR manager, like you put in your reports and it does the simple admin work. So then you can go do one-on-ones with the team and coach, which is where the value is. And I just think it's such a good extension of, if you're already doing great stuff, then you can you can prescribe the menial tasks and then go work on the good stuff. Like I think a lot about in video first content, where you're recording conversations like this, or you're recording conversations with customers where it's the humans interacting, and then you can use AI in order to translate that to a blog post, translate that to, ROI case studies. I mean, obviously you're editing along the way, but you're spending all of your time on the super valuable human interaction portion of it. And
Right.
I mean, there's just a lot when you start thinking about it in that lens that you can do. And I think it fuels profitability, right? Like you're now able to do a lot more.
Exactly. And in AI, the use of AI, it did come out of necessity. It did. And you mentioned the human factor. The human factor can be, thrust onto yourself here, right? I was able to instead of just being heads down, running the marketing from a fractional standpoint and an SDR team and all the things in between, right? I was able to save time on just some of the busy work, some of the analysis and things that would take hours and hours and hours to focus on the human aspect. And believe me, right now, that's a huge thing, especially managing SDR teams. And for those that have done that before, it's, that's important to them. Is like, am I talking to my boss on a regular basis? My career's getting off and running, so, how am I doing? Am I on track for other opportunities in the organization, right? I was able to have those conversations a little more deeper with the team. So there's an immeasurable there probably, in terms of helping them out. But yeah, it really helped us out a lot. So.
Are you seeing more, like, I know there's always this debate of SDR teams reporting into marketing and not, and you've mentioned it quite a few times through here. Like, is that a trend that you're seeing more SDR teams report into marketing?
Trend might be a strong word right now. I'd say more it's a preference, almost a recommendation, or almost been to me actually been close to a deal breaker. With it, at the very least, let me put it this way: at the very least, having the inbound function of the development reps report into marketing.
Okay.
It's not always easy to do, but we did this at the Trenkite example again you brought up. We had an independent inbound SDR team that reported into marketing. So viciously aligned with what was going on in marketing, as you can imagine there. Now, most of the other ones have been more like, the outbound and inbound function together. The outbound function with sales, I think that can work. That's fine. But there's I've seen a sizable, and I'll say sizable, increase in conversion when that function is sitting on the marketing team versus the sales team. It's not that it can't be done. I'm just saying that there's a little bit more investment in it, and it's probably something through the reporting chain, the team you sit on, a little bit more invested. I've just seen that. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. So shifting gears a little bit. So closing out. So for AI, definitely you can build yourself an SDR manager. Think about it in terms of building yourself a GTM stack of apps that can do stuff and make you a better marketer. And don't be fearful. But I want to talk a little bit about, so you're a growth marketer. We've talked in this, and you had mentioned when we were prepping for this, I'm going to take both your examples. So you have Trendkite going 10 to 30 million. And then we want to talk about Parsley. And in the Trendkite, 10 to 30 million, this is, we're just going to get right into it. I think you said in 2 years. And so in the current environment, like that amount of growth at that time was, people were doing it regularly. Like, is that type of growth possible now, or like are companies doing that level of growth?
I believe they are, and I believe it's possible.
Okay.
Right. We're back to the start of our conversation here.
Yeah.
On 2 points, right? The type of individuals that are involved in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That have a keen, it's one thing to say it, the other to do it, but some, folks that have a keen drive and understanding in their relative disciplines and their relative positions in an organization to focus on that growth. And it's a top down, bottoms up, two-way street across the board. So that needs to happen. And then it's back to more the tactical element of it, which is the ICP work. I'll just go back to that.
Okay.
In both cases, from the marketing standpoint, that's where I started, right? Is working with the organization to clearly identify, break down, understand, and then from marketing, bring to the table, this is how we're going to talk to them. This is how we're going to go get them. You bring up the Parsley example. That's one that's interesting because
yeah.
Go.
I was going to lead into that because, so you're saying finding the right people, doing ICP work. And you mentioned like when we did the prep for this, you talked about like finding 1 or 2 acquisition channels in that. And I feel like that's probably a really good thought. And like, how do you accelerate growth now past 20, 30% with these teams and covering different acquisition channels?
And in that particular example, it was there was an ICP entering our space. We're doing content analytics. The company had built its reputation in media and publishing, bread and butter. It's what we sold into. So it's just improving upon that. But to take that next area of growth, we realized that content analytics isn't just important to media and publishing or content-rich websites. Content marketers, CMOs, anyone that's cultivating content that has, a revenue number or a number over their head, this is a valuable platform for them to be using in the cultivation development of their content. And so I had to know how to talk to them, And so it was not easy, it was painful at times, but kind of going through like the makeup of this ICP, having a discussion and literally discussion in the room with everyone, again, product, finance, executive leadership, marketing, sales, SDR, account management. So that's, leaders from every department in the conversation, looking at the data assigned, to represent everything along the journey of customers and potential customers alike. And going through that exercise, we had to go through that. And then for marketing, we had to go devise the messaging and start devising the playbook for how to go to market. Now, scratching the surface, yes, the one channel of us just, okay, we know what they're thinking. Let's go get them. We started implementing very traditional efforts, webinars, videos, content, things like that. Yeah. And it worked. We got leads coming in. But it was taking a few steps deeper into things of like, where are they visiting and why? Where are they spending their time? And so I started paying some attention to some of our traffic. And, sometimes you can stumble on a pretty solid or a gold mine. And in this case, we did. is that there was an article or a page or something that one of the co-founders written years ago that people were stumbling on. It was just it was coming through on search pretty heavily, top 5, top 10, and I noticed it, and they were searching a derivative of content analytics made easy, and stumbling on this page and converting at a pretty high rate. It seemed like I was like, all right, so what's going on here? So I got bold and just dubbed a whole campaign, content analytics made easy, changed the homepage, titled a webinar that, titled our video content, blog content, ebooks, playbooks, whatever. It was all centered around content analytics made easy. And it struck gold. It ended up being everything we touched turned to gold for a nice long stretch there, because we just leaned into an area where this new ICP they were thirsty for. And we were quenching their thirst with content, just easily explaining why this can be an easy function at their organization where they can see results.
Yeah. And I love that example because so often as marketers, we think more activities, more things. And once you find, like, if you could run your whole company off of paid search, I worked for a company where it was two things. It was paid and organic search. That's all they did. And they were doing 60 mil. And if you can do that, that's actually a really good thing. There's no reason to have a bunch of different things. And this is like, you stumble upon this particular message and this target, like you just go after it and you lean on it. And I would almost say the takeaway to this is that if you're doing a lot of stuff, that should only be to test your way to the 2 or 3 things that are going to be your 80% moneymaker. And in smaller teams, I think that's a necessity at this point.
Yeah, but I'd say something to be cautious of, big and small teams alike. And it's really hard to get over this, is the doubling down part is actually harder than it seems, because people get tired of things, right? They get tired of like, oh, you're running that again. Oh, you're running again. It's like, but it's working. You know what I mean? It's working. Yes, you augment. Yes, you change up a little bit, but sometimes there can be campaign fatigue, as you may have seen here. But yeah, that's one thing that I would just sort of advise is like, yeah, if it's rolling, keep going. You may get tired of it internally. Sales reps will like, oh, you're running that again, or another piece of content on that, or another video on this. It's like, yeah, man, it's coming in. So if it's working, keep doing it.
So the caution is there, knowing that internally you might start getting a little bit of fatigue and you have to kind of like navigate around that.
Right.
Until you start to see fatigue in the marketplace. I mean, that's an entirely different thing. And then you do have to shift.
Yeah.
Are there any other burning topics that you think that marketers should be thinking about in today's environment? I don't want you off here.
No, that's fine. We kind of in this a little bit on AI and go to market. So, I mean, I just get across to your audience that really the future right now for marketers, it's for those that build systems, build this into the workflow, and let that help you to scale at a faster rate. I can't say that with enough emphasis right now, right? We touched on the executive team, right? Boardrooms, no place for guesswork. Sounds simple. Come armed with data, right? Come armed with data there. So we talked about that a little bit there. And just lean into like, just, that it, again, sounds simple, but leaning into, understanding what the profit margins are, move into the more the qualified space of what you're producing and so forth. That's going to be a winning combination. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that recap, leaving the audience with some of the key things that we went through. All important. I'm a big fan of AI, not in the buzz term, but finding, agents and workflows and the like. I appreciate you jumping on and having the time. Where should people connect with you? Where would you like people to follow up with you?
Oh, thanks for asking that. No, it was a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited, and I want to applaud you for getting this podcast going. I think it's an important topic, and a big fan of yours, Logan. So yeah, definitely excited for folks to listen to what you got going here. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, David Cardiel, Cardiel, so they can just, do a LinkedIn search. I do have my website, davidcardiel.com. That pretty much has all the information there. And then email is Cardiel, Cardiel at davidcardiel.com. They can find me there.
Well, awesome. Appreciate it. And we'll link those in the show description. And yeah, again, David, appreciate having the conversation and love being able to go AI, talking exec speak, and the like.
Mhm.
Thanks, everybody.
Great to be here. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.